The hybrid blockchain we're building for Omnitude is positioned to solve some of the big problems for business. We've not built something single solution, we've made it easy for companies to adopt blockchain technology right in the heart of their business systems. The system we've built is highly customizable, extensible, and we've tried to make it very easy to use. Omnitude is effectively a blockchain toolkit for businesses. I consider myself incredibly lucky to be working with the amazing team building arguably the world's first blockchain middleware layer. We've been really supported by our community and we're already forging close relationships with some of the key customers who can't wait to get their hands on Omnitude. I can't wait to release what we've built to the developer community. A key part of this project for me is supporting developers to take what we've built and extend it further. It's why once we release Omnitude Core, we'll be supporting developers to build and extend further on what we've started creating. I think one of the key things for me about building Omnitude is that we're treading entirely new ground. We're building something no one's ever built before. There's no rule book, there's no customer demands that we need to follow with what we're building. We get to decide for ourselves what we think the correct route is to take. By that, there's no limits to what we can build. The decisions we make are the ones for the right reasons, rather than kind of bowing to customer demand for that. And by that, we've then made this amazing piece of technology that I can't wait to show everyone.
So I think having been here from the start, it was literally an idea that was discussed over a couple of beers on the beach with Chris that's rapidly evolved into something that is clearly going to benefit those that want to use it. Being at the forefront of this technology, we don't have much to draw down on in terms of other people's experience, so we're all learning, and that for me is major. Learning and developing as a person is fundamental to everything that I do. I want to make sure that everybody else in the business is having the same opportunity. I think those of you that have met some of us online already will know that we're not the traditional stuffy businessmen and women. We're actually a like-minded bunch of individuals, arguably misfits, that are trying to make a difference, and I think hopefully our personas are represented in our community as well, and I mean that in the kindest possible way. We're a technology company, we're not a crypto business, so our focus is now on building real-world solutions that make sure that they use the best of traditional business, these new technologies, and the benefits both businesses and consumers alike.
What I love about OmnitudeID is, as we see the market changing, and from a brand perspective, which is my background, I see a great change coming up. So blockchain and a self-sovereign identity are the right technologies at precisely the right time. And businesses need to adopt these technologies and adopt them quickly if they're looking for a competitive advantage. For every blockbuster, there's an Netflix. So a self-sovereign identity allows the customer to be rewarded for sharing their data. That data is more valuable than the data that people buy from databases. It's more valuable because it actually belongs to the customer, which means businesses that put customer need at the heart of their proposition will have a data advantage over those who don't. So where we are at this moment in time, and the initial launch of OmnitudeID is the first of many solutions for many customers, and it is a very, very exciting place to be.
The biggest challenge we've probably faced as Omnitude is hiring our team, which is something that now we've got in place. We've got a significant development resource. As everyone knows, kind of blockchain developers are hard to find. We've kind of curated now our own team that work incredibly well together, and by the demo you're about to see, we'll show the results of that. The next thing for me with Omnitude is, obviously, we've only just got started. The first release of Omnitude Core and OmnitudeID is only the very first step along a long road towards building this platform into the potential that it's got or could have. Hi, welcome to Omnitude's first ever live video. I'm Chris, obviously the CEO. I'm really proud today to be showing you. Oh. If you just bear with us, everyone, we're just having a camera problem, which is being resolved as quickly as possible. Although while you can't see me, I might as well talk for a little bit. So really proud today to be showing you our first ever live video, as you can see from our production problems. But more importantly, the first major step in our journey of Omnitude. Today we're going to get the chance to show you what we've been working on behind the scenes. And if everyone likes to stay behind after the demo, we'll also do a Q&A where we can discuss anything you've seen, but also anything kind of wider on Omnitude. Here with me is John, if John wants to introduce himself.
Hi everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm John Harris. I'm the Chief Branding Officer of Omnitude. Are we back on? We are.
Oh, there we are.
So I'm the Chief Branding Officer for Omnitude. What we're about to see, for me, is very exciting. It changes the relationship between consumers and brands, which I've dealt with all my life. It's the first app of many that we are about to launch. First on our roadmap, and if you want to check out the roadmap, it's on our website. But it's very exciting for us now to be able to demonstrate the holy grail that many blockchain businesses are talking about, and that is a self-sovereign identity. So that's enough from me. I'll talk to you all later in the AMA. But I hand back to Chris, and we're going to try and get to show you the demo as soon as we possibly can. Thank you.
Right, so subject to this all working, I should now be able to hand you over to James Worthington, who's our CTO over in Atlanta. James, you there?
Well, I'm definitely here. Can everybody hear that I'm here? I'm not hearing any responses, so I'm going to...
no, mine's just said we have ears, so we should be all good.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Well, thanks, Chris. We're very excited to show you what we've got so far. It is still a work in progress, of course, but the Omnitude staff, along with our partners at Swisscom, been working very diligently for the last several months to get all the pieces in place to the point where we can start to demonstrate the ideas and the capabilities behind what we're doing with the OmnitudeID. We'll go ahead and get started here with the straight up demo. As with any type identity management application, you would of course have to create your username, password, and so on in order to access your account. So I'll just make up some stuff here. And now simply click the Create Omnitude ID. Now let me explain what's going on here. It'll take just a couple of seconds. Well, just a couple, as I had hoped. We are actually creating multiple pieces and joining them together in our middleware layer of identity. So in particular, we have to have the Hyperledger Fabric token capabilities for every user that's created. We also have to have the INDI, also known as sovereign as well, self-sovereign identity piece created. And then we also have to create for the user a Stellar account in order to receive the payments for the value when they share when they choose to share their information. So once the ID has been created, we can now log in with it. And you'll see, of course, that initially everything is blank. Well, not supposed to be the whole page blank. I think I clicked too fast there. There we go. So let me explain this in a little bit of detail. We don't want to go into a whole lot of detail, but what we really want to make sure that everybody understands is this is not just, go dump a bunch of data in here and then it gets shared. It's really important to us to implement and enforce the self-sovereign identity management principles. And so therefore, sharing of data needs to be when the user chooses to share that data and how much of that data. So we've divided these things up into several areas at this point. We are pleased to say as well that we're very happy that we've built a very dynamic and robust mechanism for creating and interacting with the different attributes and giving the granular level of control that we need in order to make sure that only the amount of information that you want to share is shared with any organization that you might interact with. And these things are going to always be on a per website basis or a per organization basis or a per transaction basis. So to give a little bit more detail here, we'll just do this real quickly. Can put in a number of different things here that we consider to be sort of the global preference sets, right? You can choose the languages that you want to interact with, different measurement systems that you might like, and then you can update those settings. Now, to give a little bit better demonstration of what actually happens here when you use the OmnitudeID to go interact with a website, you would go to their website and it would have a little button that says log in with your OmnitudeID. Clicking this button right here is for us the equivalent of that within an e-commerce vendor site. This is how we test all our pieces. Like I said, we're in the process of hooking this together with several different e-commerce vendor sites to give a full flavor. But right now we test it and show it and demonstrate it from our little test login panel here. So if I had been on an e-commerce vendor site and I'd click the button to use my OmnitudeID, it would ask me, of course, to validate myself initially. And then I would click log in. And what you'll see here is that I must give permissions for each detailed level of permissions and attributes that I might choose to share with that particular e-commerce site. I don't have to share any, of course. I can deny that I want to share any information or data at all. And you can see, of course, that the user, myself, I've denied access to any and all information, and therefore the e-commerce vendor did not receive any information from me. If I did it again for a different site, or maybe this same site when I come back later on, again, you'll see that I have the opportunity to choose to share one or all of those attribute sets, in which case the vendor site would get an access token that can be used then to send it back to the Omnitude platform, at which point, given that you have approved that information, they've received a valid token, we will present the information that you've chosen to share with that e-commerce vendor site. And then to illustrate a little bit more what happens behind the scenes when you choose to share information, whether it's one piece, two pieces, three pieces, or all the different parts of your information, there will be a transaction of some sort in e-com from the vendor's account over to your account. We'll just say for the moment that that was 0.01 e-com. Of course, this all happens behind the scenes. You just click the share button and then you'll be able to see the transaction occur and show up in your account. So if you did actually go out to the Stellar testnet, you would see that transaction at that URL. Or we can come back over to our dashboard setting, see our current account balance, as well as see that last transaction that just occurred and was credited to our account. So that's the general principle behind things. One of the things that we'd really like to emphasize as well is that while we've put together all the pieces, we're very excited about all the pieces. We now are entering the customer discovery phase. We have, put in place the capabilities and the components for us to create and share and control and receive value for the different pieces of information. We've only implemented for this particular demonstration at this point the apparel attributes, but we've got a very dynamic structure that allows us to create additional attribute categories, subcategories, and attribute component sets. So we might end up with music preferences, for example, different genres and so on. We can also have electronic preferences. I like Apple over PC over Linux-based. Whatever it is that we need to present to our users to give them the opportunity to share that data. That's where we are right now. We're looking for the feedback from the vendors on what information they would like to see and how much they'd be willing to pay for it. And then, of course, the information that users might be willing to share and what type of reimbursement they would expect in exchange for sharing that. So these are all unknowns to us right now. That's why we're entering the customer discovery phase. Remember, this is a completely new economic model where it is the people that share data that receive the reimbursement for sharing that, and not the data middleware people, the data brokers, the data consolidators that all look to spy on you and figure out and get your data and charge vendors to give them that information. And of course, that information is nowhere near as accurate as when it's done voluntarily. It'll also be corroborated with transactions as they move through the process. We have quite a number of ideas about how we use these different attributes in relationship to what is shared, when it's shared, how it's shared, who it's shared with, and what the reimbursement for is in that. So we're very much looking forward to the feedback from both the e-commerce vendors as well as our general users. And we are definitely anxious to get through the customer discovery phase, really get these attributes and details settled where we know where the value is, and present those out to the world to start using. So I know there might be some questions around this. I know that Chris is going to give us a little bit of a overview wrap up here, and then we're going to go into the question and answer phase. So Chris, back to you.
Thanks, James. So as you've seen there, that's a short demo of OmnitudeID. That's very much a technical demo. One of the things that we're going to be bringing up more on soon is the kind of the commercial benefits of that kind of data. We haven't gone into how that affects e-commerce, or particularly what those attribute sets, the kind of power behind those and what they can bring. This is just obviously, like I said, a technical demo. Where we're at the moment, happy now to take some questions. I've already seen one that we've had is, how difficult is it for the e-com partner to integrate OID? When we go live with OID, it should be natively integrated into one or multiple platforms, especially more as time goes on, that the vendor will literally check a checkbox and they're automatically integrated with OID. OID isn't just e-commerce, although obviously we keep talking about e-commerce. This is only the very first part of the technology, where a lot of our work so far has been around building Omnitude Core, which there'll be further live videos about soon. And this base part of things like microtransactions and so on, which we've crossed a lot of hurdles to get to that stage.
If I could just add to that, how exciting it is to see the first fully functioning self-sovereign ID out there. Now it's in beta at the moment, and you've seen that, and we'll be further testing it before we launch it. But there will be a call going out for testers to help us refine the systems and help us understand how users actually use our Omnitude ID. But it's great to see consumers finally back in control of their data and at last being rewarded for it and not being farmed for it, which I think is a really important point. So we're going to have a call to testers out there soon. If you don't want to miss that, then I would suggest you subscribe to our emails or join our Telegram channel, or even follow us on Twitter. And fairly soon we'll be putting that call out there, and we'd love to have as many people as we possibly can kicking the tires of our Omnitude ID.
So if you take another question, this one I think will be for you, James. Daniel says, what's your take on Sovereign? Will you be collaborating?
Oh, we'll absolutely be collaborating with Sovereign. We're very big fans of Sovereign. We're quite looking forward to implementing that. you know, that's one of the advantages of us being a middleware, but it's also one of the, I'm going to say, you know, tricky parts, right? We're going to be in a transition phase here. So, you know, once Sovereign goes live, I believe they're still talking tentatively next month. We have to, you know, make sure that there's enough adoption in that network for us to be able to interact with the different parties. What we've done then is currently we're using Indy by itself to mimic what would happen in the live Sovereign network. And then as soon as Sovereign gets going enough for us to be able to use, then we just switch that over and start using the Sovereign piece instead.
All right, great. Another question we've got from Navin. Will the vendor ever know that they're dealing with blockchain? I'll answer that one. They can. The technology is not entirely reliant on blockchain, but the entire principle behind it is blockchain. So those that want to kind of deeper dive within it, they don't need to have any kind of deep technical knowledge to understand what the platform's doing. They can just kind of be happy with the benefits it brings. Another one. This one's for you, James, I think. From same as above, is the OID reliant on the sponsored nodes being live, or will it be working before that?
Well, it'll be working before that, but we are certainly committed to making sure that those folks interested in sponsoring nodes will have an opportunity. There might be, you know, some, you know, minor and slight mismatch in timing on that. You know, our first focus is making sure all the nodes run, everything's live, and so on. But there's no technical dependency between there, but there is a, you know, a business dependency there. As we've stated, that's exactly what we intend to do.
Okay, thanks for that. Another question we got from Mark Taylor. As a Magento user, we'd need to wait until they integrate OID. I'll take that one as a bit of a commercial one. Obviously, we're partnered with CSCart within our first release of that to refine and get the software where it needs to be. But obviously, we'll be aggressively integrating with other platforms as time comes and the technology is ready.
Well, then if I could add just a little bit to that as well, there are in most cases, and we know for certain there is in Magento, there is the capability of writing plugins to operate in there. So we're not 100% dependent on many of the vendors from implementing this natively. We do encourage that. We do want to do that, but in some cases it might make the best sense to write the plugin first so that they start to see the real value, and while we wait on them to, you know, more natively integrate the Omnitude ID into the rest of their platform.
Okay, another question actually from same as above, which, John, I'll give this one to you. What's the major benefit for a vendor for signing up to the OID? Is it just better data?
Well, there's several benefits. Most vendors, brands, businesses are striving for a frictionless customer experience. The easier you can make it for a customer to interact with your brand or your service, the better. So a single sign-on aspect of the Omnitude ID is one of those ways you can break down those barriers for welcoming on new customers. But it's also the data is, you know, earned data is very different from bought data. You can buy, you know, databases left, right, and centre, and they'll tell you generalised things. But if you deliver a relationship with your customer that is built on respect, and you reward your customer, and your customer's going to tell you far deeper information about their buying habits, what they buy with you, but also what they buy with other people. And that allows the vendor who has that data to have a competitive advantage over someone who doesn't. So there are many, many benefits. And the fact that it's so easy to integrate, and once we've finished with the CSCart piece and we go across all these other platforms, it is essentially a plugin. Then the costs, the benefits far outweigh the costs. So I think that's that one.
Great. Yeah, you said brilliant, and it's free to join. James, do you want to talk a little bit around the kind of the economy of, sorry, tapping. Yeah, James, can you talk a bit more about the kind of the token economy and how it relates to Omnitude ID?
Yes. Well, the question in particular was it free for a user to join? Yes, it is. There's never any requirement that you maintain any balance of ecom in your account. We anticipate in the majority of cases that users will be receiving confirmation and are not likely, at least at this stage, to be using that value for any other purposes. Now, organizations will be different. When we create organizations, that is the e-commerce vendors in this particular case, they will get a stellar account, but of course they'll have to maintain a balance when they operate within the Omnitude ID. As you know as well, this is a very large platform. We are going to be dealing with a number of areas outside of e-commerce as well, supply chain, IoT devices, warehouse management, ERP systems. Each one of those will have a slightly different economic model about what e-com must be maintained on account, what is going to be the e-com charges for the different transactions within that particular application stack, and then what will be required for interaction with those accounts. But we have no anticipation at this point of ever requiring any e-com to be deposited in the account. Most of the uses of OID for users, as we anticipate them, will be entirely for receiving fair value for when you agree to provide data to someone.
All right, great. And obviously, just to remind everyone, OmnitudeID is just the first application that we've built or started to kind of build on Omnitude Core, that it's something that runs on the system, which obviously we'll be talking more about in the days and weeks to come. Another question we've got is, as a retailer, when am I likely to be able to deploy OID on my website? For that, it would be 2019 would be that once we're kind of in that first stage of deployment with hopefully, well, with CS Cart, but also hopefully other platforms. Another question from Sean Collins, which I think we'll put to you, James. Would it incorporate hotel accommodation, passport information, room preferences? So arguably middleware for the travel industry. And I'll also add on to that question one that other than e-commerce, have you identified immediate use cases in other industries for the OID?
Well, let me say directly that that's where we're trying to work through the next few weeks, is identifying all these areas. From the technology and platform perspective, it's very easy and very straightforward to implement all of those things. However, of course, we have to go through customer discovery. We need to finalize additional partnerships. We'd be more than happy if there were enough people in the hotel industry, or if there was enough demand from our user base to implement those. I think it's really just a question of priorities and sequencing in terms of how we move through these things. Those are certainly areas that we've identified now that we're going to be looking at. But we also have, as part of our main core platform, is creating the identity for organizations, as well as identities for devices that interact with the internet, primarily IoT devices, of course. And those three identity platform pieces can then be used along with a few other pieces to implement specific things within specific industries. We currently have a large amount of interest in the entire supply chain, but that encompasses a number of different aspects. So you've got authenticity of the product, you've got ownership of the product, you've got possession of the product in the cases where you might be a transporter, but you're not legally liable or owning of that piece of product. And then, of course, you have to then certify that the entire chain of possession and ownership has been moved successfully throughout all the different participants in that particular ecosystem. So that seems to be the one at the moment that we're getting the largest amount of interest in, but it crosses a lot of different industries. So authenticity, of course, is part of the original supply chain piece. But there are, for example, luxury good markets where authenticity may be the most important piece, and not necessarily the full chain of custody. There's quite a number of other industries that utilize a very similar process, and particularly in terms of sustainability, where it's not quite the same model as supply chain, but it uses the same components of authenticity, ownership, certification to compliance with the the green standards and sustainability standards and so on. They're all very similar. So we look to see what kind of feedback we get during the customer discovery phase, where the largest interest is, both from our potential, corporate partners, as well as our individual users and the rest of the ecosystem.
Very great. So another question we've got is, will you be promoting the use cases to the consumers with advertising, or focus mainly on implementing with vendors and letting its use case be discovered organically? It's one that I'll answer. That the kind of the go-to market strategy would be both of those for us. That there's massive benefits for consumers, but also retailers. And what we'd hope to do is that then retailers are kind of both us from the consumer side asking retailers to adopt this technology, but then also kind of retailers introducing people to it as well. Another one that we'll probably all pitch in a bit on this one, that quite a few people asked, is about GDPR. That with GDPR, companies will now struggle to obtain data. This looks like it'd be 100% GDPR compliant, therefore the data would be better, cheaper, and also compliant. Is that true? So for that, GDPR is something with OmnitudeID and data that we've been ensuring that we make sure we're compliant with that at all points, including one of the other ones we're looking at is kind of manual automatic removal of data based on when it's shared and so on, to ensure kind of greater than GDPR. I don't know, John, do you want to weigh in?
I mean, GDPR hasn't really addressed blockchain yet. It's a legislation that's addressing a current issue and not a future issue. So I think blockchain is completely aligned to a lot of the aspects of GDPR, and I think James has an opinion on that as well. But it's not just GDPR, and there's lots of, that's what we have here in Europe, but the States has a different legislation against that as well, and that's a state-by-state basis as well. But they all want the same, and that's to protect consumers' data. And blockchain could be transforming data protection, and the OmnitudeID introducing that technology should actually have a better solution than most existing systems currently.
James, you got anything to say on GDPR?
Yes, I do, because that's one of the things that excites me the most about what we're doing. There are a number of different aspects to GDPR. A lot of it revolves around control of the data set. So as you just saw, we've got very granular level of control. Users get to decide when, where, and how they receive that or share that data, and also, of course, receive some compensation in return for having shared that data. Additionally, one of the often stated requirements is for a user to be able to know what the data is, so they can clearly see what the data is in their management dashboard. They control what that data is, and of course, then users are in the GDPR world allowed to, complain or ask for justification of any of that data. Here, it's clearly available to them. They can change that data as appropriate. So it's just built into the platform. And I know that some of the folks around the world might not have seen this, but just 2 days ago, Senator Wyden introduced a bill in the U.S. that will provide penalties of up to, I believe it was $5 million or 25% of the highest compensation over the last 3 years to the officers of any corporation that does not comply with those same sorts of requirements as we would see in GDPR. Now, of course, it's the U.S., so I'm sure those penalties will be, watered down a bit before they actually get implemented. But there's a strong movement afoot that is across parties to implement considerably more control, and they follow a lot of the same GDPR standards. That is, users must be able to control when their data is shared. Users must be able to just see what data is being shared. And users must be able to change or control or deny those pieces of information. So we're really excited to be on the forefront of enforcing and participating in a world that is GDPR compliant, regardless of whether the laws are in place for that or not.
All right, great. So we'll just do a couple more questions. I'm very aware, obviously, everyone here in the UK is looking forward to going out to fireworks. One of the other ones, which I guess for James, is will you integrate passive tracking later so we can stay signed in while we move between sites? It'd be nice if it wasn't necessary to sign into every vendor.
So I'm not entirely sure what the question was, but there are a number of different options. We can do that. That's part of what we're looking for in the customer discovery and feedback as we move through the beta testing phase here. What is the exact user experience that needs to occur? We certainly can control that and provide that option. But also there has been a lot of concern expressed among some of our preliminary folks looking at this, that they wanted to make sure that they had the opportunity to punch the button. That is kind of the standard. That is kind of the way it generally works at this point. We're not constrained by the technology for that. But those are the kind of ideas and feedback that we need in order to, really determine and finalize the exact usability capabilities.
All right, great. So another one we've got, is there any potential for government citizenship ID application? OID might bring balance to those kind of projects. OID would absolutely become a 1984 antidote. So obviously one of the things that we're exploring, OmnitudeID is kind of perfectly placed as an ID system to work with those, and it's something we're actively looking at and discussing with partners. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, James, just on kind of government ID and so on.
Well, we believe that's one of the best use cases, but as we also know that governments move slowly, it's a little bit more difficult to enforce things with them. We don't have as much opportunity, for example, to make plugins to a government ID system, and I think that they're going to want to proceed a little bit slowly in the implementation of those things. But we're definitely very excited about that possibility. We definitely have quite a few conversations underway with a few smaller governments, and we very much think that that is the best approach.
All right, great. And so probably our last question would be, how do you comply with the right to be forgotten on the blockchain? I think that's definitely one for you again, I'm afraid, James.
I know you're just picking on me today, aren't you? So there's a number of different aspects to that.
Thank you.
In terms of right to be forgotten. So if you think, and I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail, this almost might be worth some different discussions, and we definitely want to get feedback on that. There's the intent of right to be forgotten, and then there's the details of right to be forgotten. So as of now, you of course with our Omnitude ID and platform, you're completely in control. When you say you don't want to share any more data, then that data is no longer shared. So it certainly meets the full intent of the requirement. Now, as John had mentioned earlier, there's sometimes a little bit of disconnect between the way blockchain works and the way laws are potentially written. There is in Hyperledger Fabric currently some difficulties in doing a direct delete. However, we have already some options that we can implement to do that. There's also, you have to figure in a little bit of the physical aspect of, if you for example made a purchase, then under GDPR you cannot necessarily require an organization to forget that they ever sold you something, right? So there's still some lack of complete understanding of the details, both from the regulatory perspective as well as from what does the world want in terms of compliance and the right to be forgotten. So rest assured that we're very much on top of all that. We're very much interested in making sure that both the intent and the legal specifics are met, and that we will in fact definitely handle the right to be forgotten.
I think cut off at the end there, but I think that was the right to be forgotten.